let's go ahead and start the homework questions for section 4.2. And for this homework guide, I will start off with question number 2. And for this particular problem, I need to describe whether the sentence is a positive, negative, or zero rate of change. Now, rate of change, this is a very fancy way of just saying slope. So is the slope positive, negative, or zero? Now, if you have a positive slope, the slope is going up in this direction. If it's a negative slope, then the slope is going in this direction. And if it's a zero slope, then it's just a straight horizontal line. For positive slope, I kind of like to put a little guy right here going up the mountain. And if I have a negative slope, then I put my guy in the far left, showing that he's going down the hill. All right, so those are some little reminders to help you remember whether it's a positive, negative, or zero slope. All right, so for question 2a, the rate of growth in a baby's height. All right, so when a baby is born and as time goes on, the baby will grow up. So the height is getting bigger. So that's a positive slope, right? So positive slope for that one. For letter C, the number of fans seated when the hockey game ends. Okay, so when a hockey game starts, there's probably a lot of fans. And then when the hockey game's over, then the fans leave the building. So the number of fans is decreasing. So this is a negative slope. For letter D, the area of the polar ice caps in the last 100 years. Well, 100 years ago, the polar ice caps were quite big, and over time, because of global warming, the caps are getting smaller, so this represents a negative slope. For letter E, the population of Canada since Confederation. Well, the Canada's population has been growing over the years, so this represents a positive slope. For letter F, the population of Ireland during the potato famine of 1848. So famine means there weren't a lot of potatoes available. So if access to food wasn't really available, then the population of Ireland should be decreasing because I think people are dying, and the population just isn't growing without enough food. So this is a negative slope. So negative slope there, and letter E is a positive slope. And this was a negative slope. Okay, and for letter G, driving at a steady speed of 100 kilometers per hour. Now, steady speed means you're going exactly 100 kilometers an hour forever. So since you're not increasing or decreasing your speed, then you have a steady speed there. So this is a zero rate of change. Okay, let's move on to a few more questions here. Letter J, the height of a person from age 25 to 40. Now for this question, really when you're 25 years old and from that age, you're not really increasing your height anymore. You've kind of reached your maximum height already. So when you're 25 all the way to 40 years old, we assume that your height is not changing. So that represents a steady slope there, right? So this is a zero net change. All right, because we assume that your height is not changing from 25 to 40 years old. Okay, let's move on to the next question now. I believe question number 3 is next. So let's move down to question number 3. Okay, so for question number 3, the storyline is, in order to get into shape, Josie decides to swim, run, bicycle, and stretch. Josie can swim at a speed of 5 kilometers an hour. So she can swim at 5 kilometers an hour, she can run at a speed of 10 kilometers an hour, and she bikes at 20 kilometers per hour. Match the graph with the description given. Okay. Now, before we do a question like this, I guess we have to figure out the different kinds of speeds. So I would say if you are riding a bike, you have a bike. The bike has to be the fastest, right? Because it's going at 20 kilometers per hour. After that, you are running. So running is your second fastest. And then you are swimming. And I think most people can agree that you can run faster than you can swim. So swimming is the next fastest. And then for this particular problem, you are also stretching. So now when you're stretching, this means that you're not moving. So when you're not moving, then you're pretty much the slowest, I believe. So let's just say stretching is the slowest here. Okay, so here's my ranking from fastest to slowest. So biking is the fastest, running is second fastest, swimming is the third fastest, and stretching is the fourth fastest. Now, if you're the fastest, which is the bike, this means that you have a very steep slope, a very steep positive slope. When you're running, you're getting a little bit flatter. All right, so you're still fast, but you're not as fast as the bike. So the way you show that as a slope is a little bit of a flatter slope. And then when you're swimming, you're a little bit slower, so now the line becomes even flatter. And then when you're stretching, you're not moving, so this is where you have the flattest line, which is just a horizontal line right there. So that's how the slopes would look like if you would have to graph it. Okay, so if I take a look at this region right here in green, this represents the stretching stage, right? Because that's a horizontal line. So this is where you would stretch. Okay. And then if I take a look at this line right here, this is the steepest line, right? This is very steep, so this means you are biking. Okay. Now ask yourself, you have this blue line right here, and you also have this pink line right here. Which one is steeper? Is it the pink line or is it the blue line? Which one's steeper? So I believe this one is steeper right here, so this means you should be running. And then this one right here would be your swimming. That line would represent the swim. Okay. So the yellow line is the steepest, the light blue is the second steepest, and then the swimming is a little bit flatter, and then that green line is when you have a straight horizontal line, so that would kind of describe the general motion here. Okay, so if I had to kind of think about this, it would be running, then stretching, then swimming, then biking, right? So I guess that would match letter C, right? Running, stretching, swimming, then biking. Okay, so this would be graph number 1. Okay, now that we know the storyline there, we can kind of label the rest of the diagrams because the rest of the diagrams are using the exact same images, and we just got to figure out the order now. Okay, let's move on to question number 2 here. Okay, so the order is, well, this is the steepest, right? So this means this is your bike. This is where you're biking. This one's a flat line, so this is where you are stretching. Oops, stretch. And then finally ask yourself, which one is steeper? Is it this blue line or is it this pink line? Well, the light blue line is steeper, right? So which represents the faster, since the blue line is steeper than the pink line, then that represents a faster speed, right? So the faster speed here has to be running, and this is your swimming. Okay, so swimming, biking, stretching, and running. So I believe that would be letter F, right? Letter F. So swimming, biking, stretching, then running. Okay, so this would be number 2. Okay, let's go on to question number 3 now. Okay, for question number 3, I believe this one right here, that's your steepest line. So this is your bike. This is your flat line, so this is your stretch. This is your stretch here. Sorry, R-E-T-C. That's your stretch. And then ask yourself, which is a steeper line? Is it this blue guy or is it this yellow guy? Well, the blue guy is the color that I'm using for the steeper line, so this is your run, and this is your swim. Okay, so based on that, for question number 3, I believe this would be letter D, right? Bike, run, swim, then stretch. Okay, so this would be 1, 2, 3. All right, and that's how you do this particular problem for question number 3 here. All right, so let's move on to letter 4 here. Go ahead and find the steepest line. So here's the steepest line, right? So that's your bike. And then find your flat line, which is right here. That's your stretch. And then the 2 lines are left. Well, this thing right here and this thing right here, I would say this is always going to be your this is always your running, and this is your swimming. Okay, so for letter 4, that would be that would match up with letter E, right? Oh, not letter E. Sorry, that would match up with A, run, bike, stretch, and swim. Okay, so this is going to be A. Okay, let's move on to the last 2 here. And for number 5 here, okay, so for number 5, this is your steepest line right there, so that's your bike. This is your flat line right here, so that is your stretch. And then the 2 lines left, the one that goes up 2 over 2, this is going to be your swim. And finally, that line right there is going to be your, sorry, botched that one there. Sorry, this one right here is going to be your run, and that's going to be your swim. So sorry about that. So for number 5, I believe that one's going to be, is that letter B? Stretch, run, swim, bike. Yeah, so this is going to be number 5 here. Okay, so sorry about that. This one right here, if you go over 2, up 2, that's your running. That's the part that represents the run. Okay, and then this one here again, same kind of problem. Right here, that's the steepest line, so this is going to be your bike. This is your flat line, so that's your stretch. And then up 2 over 2. So I kind of botched this on the previous problem. This is the up over 2 up 2. This represents the run. And then this means this is your swim. All right, so for that particular one, that should be, this should be letter E, I believe, right? Bike, swim, stretch, run. Okay, so this should be E. All right, so that's it for question number 3 there, just matching the right graph with the description there. And just make sure you can identify the bike ride and the stretch. Those are the easiest. And then the 2x2 case for all of these is the running one. Okay, let's move on to question number 4 now. Determine the rate of change. Okay, so remember, whenever the problem is asking for a rate of change, this is the same thing as finding your slope. Okay, so for this next one, question 4a, I guess the problem has to do with reading a novel here. So just by looking at this, the question is this a positive or negative slope? This is definitely going to be a positive slope, because if I put my person on the far left-hand side, this person is moving up the hill, right? So this is a positive slope. After that, I would just make a triangle. So here is a triangle that I'm constructing here between these 2 points. Find your rise. Okay, so I'm going from a 30 to a 90, right? So the rise here is going to be 60. So 60 is my rise. And then what's my run? My run is from this direction right here, right? Or that range. So from 1 to 3, that's going to be 2, right? So that horizontal distance represents 2 hours. So my rise is going to be 60. Sorry. My rise is going to be 60, and my run is going to be 2. So that's going to be 30. Now, what are my units? Okay, so my units, on my rise, my units are going to be pages, right? Pages read, so this is pages per hour. All right, so 30 pages per hour is my rate of change. All right, so slope represents that every hour I read 30 pages. Okay, let's move on to letter C now. Now for letter C, I got to find the rate of change here, which is the slope. If I put my guy in the far left-hand corner here, this represents a positive slope, because he's going up the hill. And then if I draw a triangle here, what's my rise? Well, this is 10, and this is 20, right? So my rise is going to be 10. And then what's my run? Well, I'll go from 10 to 30, right? So my run here is going to be 20. So if I have to calculate my slope now, my slope is my rise, which is 10, right? And what's my run? My run is 20. So 10 divided by 20 is 50%, so I can write that as 0.5. And then what are my units? Well, my units are dollars per kilometers. All right, so although that's kind of correct, you should always put your dollar sign in front, which is going to be 0. It's going to be 50 cents per kilometer. So that's a better way of writing your units into your final answer there. So 50 cents per kilometer. Okay, let's move on to letter E now. So temperature change for this one here. Now, the first thing that I recognize is that if I put my person on the far left-hand side, this person is going down the hill, so this is a negative slope. All right, so let's go ahead and draw a triangle here. Okay, so this represents what, 26, and this is going to be 20. So my rise here is going to be 6. And then what's my run? Well, my run starts at 2 and ends at 6, right? So my run here is going to be 4. Okay, so slope is rise over run, so 6, which is my rise, and my run is going to be 4, right? So 6 over 4, which is the same thing as 3 over 2, and 3 over 2 is about 1.5, and it's negative, right? So this slope is negative, and then what are my units? My units are degrees Celsius over time, right? So I guess this is going by hours here, so negative 1.5 degrees Celsius per hour. So the temperature is decreasing 1.5 degrees Celsius per hour. All right, for letter F, the minimum wage in BC, since we have a straight horizontal line, this is a steady rate of change, so it's not changing, it's not going up or down, so my slope is going to be 0. All right, so since my units are dollars per year, all right, so what this means is every year the minimum wage is not increasing per year.